Olá, pessoal, tudo bem? Sejam bem-vindos e bem-vindas ao canal Inglês de Verdade. Hoje você ouvirá um pequeno podcast para testar seu listening em inglês. Após ouvi-lo, você responderá 5 perguntas sobre o assunto falado para testar a sua compreensão. Fazendo isso, além de praticar seu listening, você ainda vai ganhar vocabulário em inglês. Caso queira, você pode ativar a legenda em inglês que está disponível no vídeo. Então, vamos começar!
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know that feeling, right? You wake up, maybe your heart's pounding a bit from a dream that felt so incredibly real.
Yeah.
And for just a second, you're genuinely confused. Like, wait, was that real? Or maybe later you get that weird deja vu flash.
Definitely. That feeling that you've seen this exact moment before, but it was actually in a dream hours ago.
Exactly. It's this private movie theater inside our heads, and it's one of the biggest ongoing mysteries, isn't it? People have been trying to figure out dreams forever.
For millennia, yeah.
Yeah.
But the science of what's actually happening up there while we're asleep, that still holds some pretty amazing secrets.
Right. And that's kind of the big contradiction we want to explore today. Our bodies are resting, recharging.
Powering down.
But the brain, it's buzzing. It's incredibly active. Some call it this sort of hidden period of intense creativity.
That's a great way to put it. If you look at brain scans, activity levels during certain sleep stages are almost the same as when we're awake and focused. It's definitely not just switched off.
Okay, so let's try and unpack this a bit. Our plan is to look into what we know, kind of pull out the key ideas about how the brain actually builds these internal movies.
The mechanics first, yeah.
Yeah, the mechanics, then maybe why it happens, the function, and touch on how people have tried to find meaning in it all over time. So where do we start? The main stage.
Right. If we're talking about those really vivid emotional dreams, the ones that feel real, we have to talk about REM sleep.
REM, okay.
Stands for rapid eye movement.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can actually see it, the eyes moving quickly back and forth under the eyelids. That's when the brain is like supercharged, lots of electrical activity.
Okay, but here's the thing that always gets me. If my brain is running this wild simulation, maybe I'm flying or, running from something scary.
Yeah, those action dreams.
Why am I just lying there? How come I don't, leap out of bed or start shouting?
Well, that's maybe the brain's most brilliant trick during sleep. It's a safety mechanism. During REM sleep, the brain sends signals to basically paralyze the major muscles.
Paralyzed, completely.
Well, the voluntary muscles, yeah. It's often called sleep paralysis if it kind of lingers for a moment when you wake up, which can be scary. But normally it's just this natural protective thing.
So the brain's like, okay, running the dream sequence now, a Shiver and disabling motor control, just flips a switch.
Pretty much.
No.
It disconnects the mental simulation from your actual body movements. It stops you from physically acting out whatever your dream self is doing. Imagine the chaos otherwise.
Yeah, no kidding. That would be problematic. Okay, good to know that safety lock is usually on.
Okay.
So what about the actual content, the dream itself? People sometimes think the brain has these pre-recorded stories ready to play.
Right, like a little film library. But that's not quite how it seems to work. What the research suggests is that the brain doesn't really store the dream beforehand. It's more like improvising.
Improvising.
Yeah, it's inventing and editing the whole plot, the whole story, right as it happens, in real time.
So it's not playing a movie file, it's more like a live DJ mixing things together on the fly, pulling different bits.
That's a pretty good analogy, actually. It's mixing all sorts of things. Recent memories, maybe strong feelings you had during the day, stress, happiness, whatever. And also just random bits of information, like a color you saw, a sound in the background, maybe a face you barely noticed walking down the street. Tiny fragments.
Okay, that makes sense then why dreams can be so weird and illogical.
Yeah.
One minute you're in your childhood kitchen, the next you're suddenly, I don't know, climbing Mount Everest with a talking squirrel.
Exactly. There are no logical segues, no smooth transitions, because the part of your brain responsible for logical reasoning and critical thinking is mostly offline.
It's just throwing stuff together.
Yeah, it's this chaotic, spontaneous mixing. It doesn't have to make sense in the moment because its main job seems to be about processing. And that processing part is really important.
Okay, let's shift to that then, the function. Why? Why does the brain do all this every night? It seems like a lot of work, creating these elaborate internal films.
Well, a really big part of it seems to be about memory. Processing memories, consolidating them. There's a well-known Harvard study that looked closely at this. The analogy they often use is like the brain is cleaning its hard drive.
Cleaning the hard drive. What does that mean for the brain? Like deleting spam.
Sort of. But also organizing. Think about all the information, all the experiences you take in during the day. It's a huge amount.
Yeah, overwhelming sometimes.
Right. So during sleep, especially REM sleep, the brain seems to sift through that data. It decides what's important enough to store long-term, strengthening those connections.
Okay.
And what's just noise, what could be discarded, weakening those connections. It's like filing important documents and shredding the junk mail.
So it's strengthening the important stuff, like maybe a skill you learned or something important someone said. But then why do we forget most of the actual dream? You hear that, like 90% is gone within minutes of waking up. If the process is important, why isn't the dream story itself important?
That's a great question. The process is vital for consolidating your waking memories and experiences. But the dream narrative itself, the weird story about the squirrel on Everest, that might just be the byproduct, the side effect of all that sorting and filing activity.
And like the exhaust fumes from the memory engine?
Kind of, yeah. The narrative itself served its purpose during the processing, so the brain doesn't necessarily need to keep a perfect recording of the story once the filing is done. We remember the feeling, maybe, but the plot details just evaporate.
Okay, that makes sense. The story was just the tool, not the final product. So what happens if this whole essential process gets messed up? Like if someone doesn't get enough REM sleep?
Well, the consequences can be quite serious, actually. It really shows how important this stage is. There was a study, I think, from Rome University that looked at people who were significantly deprived of REM sleep over time.
And what did they find?
They started having daytime hallucinations.
Whoa, really? Hallucinations?
Yeah, the idea is that the brain's need to do this processing, this ARM activity, builds up so much pressure that if it can't do it during sleep, it starts trying to do it while you're awake.
So the dream world starts kind of leaking into reality. That sounds intense.
It is. It suggests that the brain is almost desperately trying to catch up on that essential work.
Yeah.
It really underlines that sleep and dreaming isn't passive. It's a fundamental cognitive need.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just rest, but active maintenance. And we spend a lot of time doing it, don't we? I saw some stats on that.
The numbers are pretty surprising when you add them up.
Like the average person spends something like 6 years of their life dreaming. 6 full years.
It's credible, isn't it? 6 years of this internal movie production.
Yeah.
And yet,
like we said, 90% of it just vanishes within 10 minutes of waking up.
Yeah.
All that creative output, mostly gone.
it's fascinating. And speaking of different kinds of dream experiences, what about people who are blind? If they've never seen, what are their dreams like?
That's a great point. Does the brain still try to make a movie?
Well, people who are blind from birth absolutely still dream. But their dreams are built from their other senses. So instead of visual scenes, their dreams are rich with sounds, smells, tastes, textures, the feeling of movement.
Wow.
It really shows that the dreaming brain just uses whatever sensory information it has available to build its world. It's not limited to vision.
So it's more like a sensory simulation studio than just a movie studio. That makes sense. And for people who do have all their senses, there's this idea of lucid dreaming, right? Taking control.
Yes, lucid dreaming is fascinating. It's when you become aware that you're dreaming while you're still in the dream.
You know it's a dream.
Exactly. And for people who learn to do this, who practice it, they can gain a remarkable level of control. They can decide to fly or change the scene, talk to dream characters consciously, even try to solve problems or practice skills within the dream state.
So you go from being just the actor and audience to being the director, too. That's pretty wild.
It really is. It turns the whole experience from passive viewing into an interactive simulation.
Okay, this is all focusing on the mechanics and the function, the sort of how and what for from a science perspective. But humans haven't always thought about it that way, have they? We've spent ages trying to figure out what dreams mean.
Oh, absolutely. For most of history, the meaning wasn't sought inside the brain's processes, but outside. Dreams were often seen as messages.
Like from gods or spirits.
Exactly. Ancient Egyptians had dream interpreters thousands of years ago. The Greeks believed gods literally communicated through dreams, offering guidance or warnings. They held this external, often divine significance.
And that search for meaning didn't stop. It just sort of shifted focus, right? Like with Freud in the 20th century.
Precisely. Freud really internalized the source of meaning. He argued dreams weren't messages from gods, but coded messages from our own subconscious minds.
The hidden stuff.
Yeah, repressed desires, unresolved conflicts, things the conscious rational mind pushes away during the day. He thought the weirdness, the symbolism in dreams Was the unconscious trying to express these hidden things while the censor of the rational mind was asleep or off duty?
So it went from divine messages to personal hidden messages from within. Where does the thinking land now? Is it just the hard drive cleaning, or is there still room for that deeper meaning?
I think the modern view is more of a blend. Researchers definitely acknowledge the crucial role of memory consolidation, emotional regulation, the functional, practical stuff.
Our brain maintenance.
Right. But they also recognize that the content produced during that process, the dream itself, can be incredibly rich with personal symbolism and emotion, drawing on deep memories and feelings. So it's kind of both functional and potentially meaningful.
Mix.
A complex mix. But here's the kicker. Despite all the progress, all the brain scans and studies...
Is that still a big question mark?
There really is. We still don't know the fundamental ultimate reason why we dream. We understand a lot about how it happens, and we see clear benefits like memory processing. But why does the brain need to create these elaborate, often bizarre sensory narratives to do that processing? That core why is still one of neuroscience's big unsolved mysteries.
Wow. So even when we're totally out, supposedly resting, our brain is relentlessly working, directing, producing, creating these exclusive films just for us, 6 years worth.
Exactly. It never really stops creating, feeling, imagining. This mystery just highlights that the mind is this incredible private universe where the normal rules of reality just don't apply, especially when we sleep.
It's a constant background process. So maybe the next time you wake up remembering bits of a weird dream, it's worth thinking about. Your brain just put on a whole production starring you. What was it trying to sort out?
It's definitely something to ponder. Pay attention to your dreams. They're a fascinating glimpse into that hidden, active world inside your own head.
Absolutely. Keep exploring what those nightly exclusive films might be showing you.
Muito bem! Espero que você tenha conseguido entender o podcast e responder as perguntas corretamente. Mesmo que tenha errado alguma, o importante é que você praticou e aprendeu algo novo hoje. Se quiser melhorar ainda mais, volte o áudio e ouça novamente. Cada vez que você fizer isso, seu listening vai ficar mais afiado. E se você gostou desse tipo de prática, não esqueça de deixar o like, se inscrever no canal e ativar o sininho para acompanhar os próximos episódios. Aqui no Inglês de Verdade, você aprende inglês de um jeito simples, direto e 100% prático. Nos vemos no próximo vídeo.
E se você assistiu até aqui e quer aprender inglês sem gastar um centavo durante todo o processo de aprendizagem, com acesso a ferramentas, atalhos e mentoria que vai fazer com que você absorva o inglês de forma rápida e natural, eu te convido a conhecer o método 9 Passos para a Fluência, onde você vai conhecer a forma correta de aprender um inglês.
Good. Now we can go in the water.
Com acesso a ferramentas que irão te auxiliar nesse aprendizado. E o melhor, todas encontradas de forma gratuita. E entre essas ferramentas, uma você usará para manter contato com nativos do inglês para que sua prática de conversação seja mais eficaz. Porque nada melhor do que absorver o inglês diretamente da fonte. E quando eu digo que essas ferramentas são gratuitas, eu não quero dizer que apenas o primeiro mês será grátis, como degustação, e que se você quiser continuar usando, você terá que pagar. Todas as ferramentas que serão apresentadas a você nesse método são gratuitas para o resto da vida, até quando você quiser usar. Esse método é perfeito para você que não tem ideia de como e por onde começar, e para você que já tem um conhecimento em inglês, mas ainda não conquistou a fluência. Nele você será apresentado a atalhos que vão acelerar seu aprendizado, que estudantes que estão começando não fazem ideia que existem. 99% das pessoas que colocarem esse método em prática, seguindo passo a passo, conseguirão realizar seu sonho de se tornar fluente em inglês. Então, se você acha que finalmente chegou a hora de realizar seu sonho e dominar de vez o inglês, clique no primeiro link da descrição, que eu tenho certeza que você não vai se arrepender.